Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Jack Smith.
I'm Anish Gupta.
And my name is Chris Maltby. Thank you guys for having me on today.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
You want to tell them a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I am a Bears fan. I am a corresponding writer at the Brawl Network, a network that just pushes out a ton of sports stuff. I'm also the host of the Bear Down podcast. We're trying to hit 1.5K soon on YouTube, just hit 1K recently. And I also run a fan page on Instagram that's gunning for 10K, the Shy Bears News.
So we're super honored to have you on today, kind of talk about the Bears offseason and where we can see them
Make
going.
sure to go follow his stuff down below. They'll be link will be in the description. So.
Yeah, we'll leave it in the description. Okay.
Yep.
So you want to start by telling us what you thought most recently about the offseason for the Bears with free agency and the draft?
Yeah, so I mean, looking at the Bears this offseason, coming in, you would assume they needed someone at edge with Leonard Floyd underproducing there in 2019.
Yep.
Only had 3 sacks, and you really need someone that can free up some space for Khalil Mack to do his thing. He's getting a lot of double teams, triple teams. So the Bears bring in Robert Quinn. That's a very interesting pickup. Tight end is something that they needed to address heavily. Trey Burton didn't play well very much last year. He only had 84 receiving yards. So they bring in Cole Kmet, obviously, in the draft. A lot of people think that pick was made a little bit high. But personally, I mean, you never know because you never know where he would have went if the Bears didn't pick him. And also, obviously, Jimmy Graham on that deal, 2 years, $18 million with $9 million guaranteed and no trade clause. I'm a little bit indifferent about that one. But they upgrade the tight end position, something that's really important in Matt Nagy's offense there in Chicago. Have a U and a Y tight end now. Also brought in Demetrius Harris, a tight end who can block. And then I think the next big need came in the secondary. The Bears lost Prince Amukamara this offseason as well as HaHa Clinton-Dix. They're trying to move Eddie Jackson back to free safety, his natural position. You need to get someone there who can play in the box, who can be a strong safety. And they bring in to Sean Gibson. That's an interesting one. I like it a lot. He signs for the veterans minimum. Also draft Jalen Johnson out of Utah there in the second round. Couple more additions. They added a rotational edge piece in Trevis Gibson. In the 5th round out of Tulsa. They signed Ted Ginn Jr. to a veterans minimum deal, so he'll provide some speed there that was lost from Taylor Gabriel. And then obviously the big one, they trade for Nick Foles. Obviously an interesting competition coming up soon with Foles and Trubisky. They just declined Trubisky's 5th-year options. So I think they did a lot to improve themselves. Some of the media doesn't think so, but I'm pretty confident heading into 2020.
Yeah, so a lot of the media and people just kind of all around like to hate on Trubisky a lot. I just kind of wanted to know what your opinion is. Watching him play 16 games a year, what is your opinion on him as a full Bears fan?
Right now, personally, I'm not too in on him. I'm not saying I completely side with the media. It's unfortunate that the kid was picked where he was. I think that led to a lot of pressure on him. Yep. And he's shown flashes at times. I mean, he's shown that he can do it, especially there in 2018 when he had 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, made the Pro Bowl. Bears were 12-4, made the playoffs. Obviously, we know how that one ended. We don't have to discuss that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you look at how they did last year. Everyone expected Trubisky to take another jump, and that simply wasn't it. Went out with a dislocated shoulder, missed one game, wasn't as consistent, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. One thing he's known for, is he's really good in the running game, 421 rushing yards on 68 attempts there in 2018, and then had 20 less attempts there in 2019 with 48. So it's interesting. I mean, I liked him a lot after 2018. I don't think he took the jump he needed to in 2019, with Matt Nagy's playbook. It's very complex, and I think Nagy was kind of teaching a very basic version of that playbook there to Mitch in 2018. In 2019, I don't think Mitch was able to pick up on what Nagy wanted to do. And I like Mitch. I think he says the right things. I think he works hard. He always answers the press, honestly, after games. But unfortunately, I don't think he's the guy personally. I think he's a little bit too inconsistent. Should be interesting, to see if Foles is healthy. But moving forward at the quarterback position, I think the Bears probably, if I were to guess, Foles starts week 1. They go through the season with him. If he can stay healthy, if he can, it could provide a good competition or a good opportunity for Trubisky to come in and earn that role again and get an extension in Chicago because his 5th-year option was obviously just declined. But I think they stick with Foles and probably look to draft a quarterback very early in 2021.
So, I got a couple kind of points off your kind of takes on what the Bears did. First off, I'm a huge fan of Matt Nagy. I think him winning the Coach of the Year, I thought he completely deserved it. And even with Trubisky in 2018, I still remember that playoff game. And I know I hate to bring it up, but that drive, the final drive, he made some big plays, right?
Absolutely.
He got him down the field, and I was a firm believer. I thought, okay, if they can make, obviously it didn't turn out that way, but if they had made the kick, there was really, I wouldn't have been shocked if they made the NFC Championship, right? Like they were riding high, their defense was strong. I still remember the Rams game back then in Sunday night. Yep, exactly. Because I actually picked them because I just thought, it's defensive grind, right? Chicago weather. They know how to play. They play the right style of defense. Obviously, the defense played well. It was just, offensive woes. But I'm also a huge fan of Allen Robinson. I just think, obviously, in Jacksonville, he had that 1,400-yard season. I believe 14 touchdowns as well. And then everyone was looking at him to take a huge leap. And actually, like DeAndre Hopkins, who had a 1,500-yard year one year, he went down to 800, and Allen Robinson had the exact same thing, right? Obviously, DeAndre picked up, and Allen Robinson is doing the same. He had around 1,200, I believe, around 1,200 yards. I think 1,150, and I think
and
6 touchdowns, something like that.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And he had a really productive year. I also had him in fantasy, so I was kind of enjoying that. But just a couple things, like the one thing for me at least, tight ends. I know there's this whole speculation about the 10 tight end thing. I mean, it's not as big of a deal to me. But my thing was, for tight ends, I usually think that you should take them later, like 4th round, maybe 5th round, because all the good tight ends, you see like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, they all came in later rounds, right? Like, for example, the Browns took Harrison Bryant. Obviously, they already have Hooper and all them guys. But I was like, there were a lot of guys left on the board. You could have taken an extra receiver maybe. Another linebacker, obviously Leonard Floyd kind of left, but you got Robert Quinn back. So another question, like, what are your thoughts on him getting 14 mil a season? Obviously, I think it was 5 years, 70 mil. But yeah, if I was a big fan of the Jalen Johnson draft pick, though. I thought that was great. Him coming out of Utah. Obviously, Utah had a tremendous year last year in college football, almost making the playoff. So that was really cool to see. But I think when it comes to the Bears, it comes down to like Matt Nagy and whether they can finally, get rid of those offensive woes, because the defense is still solid. And actually, I think, let me kind of give you 2 questions. One, would you have rather had another 2nd-round pick? That would probably be, or another guy at the 2nd-round pick. That would be one question. My second question would probably be, for Nick Foles, would you have rather had a proven talent who I'm a huge fan of, Cam Newton? Would you rather have had him, maybe even Andy Dalton at the time, or even Jameis Winston? That's the second question. And then the third, kind of, what do you see about do you think the whole Khalil Mack trade, do you think it's panning out? And do you see, because I believe there's no 1st-round pick next year. I'm not sure.
No, we do.
I think
We're back.
They have one.
Oh, they're back. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think, what do you think about the Khalil Mack thing now that it's over with, right? What do you think about the Khalil Mack trade? Do you think it was a dub in your book? So yeah, those are kind of my 3 big takeaways from the Bears offseason, my big kind of concerns.
Yeah, so first off, I mean, we had 2 second-round picks. I think it's a little bit hard to acquire a third, but it would have been nice to have another one in there. You brought up maybe drafting Kmet a little bit high, and I think that's a good point to bring up. But at the same time, I mean, Brian Kelly said, you brought up Travis Kelce. Brian Kelly said that the coach at Notre Dame said that Kmet is on the same path in regards to NFL success as he saw guys like Kyle Rudolph and Kelce when they came out of Notre Dame. I think this is actually the 20th straight year that the 4-year starter tight end at Notre Dame has been drafted in the NFL draft. So that's an impressive feat there by the Fighting Irish. But I guess we'll just have to see, I think, with the importance of the tight end position in Matt Nagy's offense. I mean, we'll see. I think Kmet's the traditional tight end, can do a little bit of everything. He can be that red zone threat. He can be that blocker. He can do a lot of stuff. So I think it's also promising because he's raw. He only played 2 years of college football at Notre Dame. He was a baseball player at Notre Dame, actually, during his freshman and sophomore years. So still pretty raw.
He's got a little bit of athleticism then, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure there's no one better to mentor him than Jimmy Graham. You can say whatever you want about Jimmy Graham, but he's surely going to have some good things to pass on. Yeah. As far as the Foles trade goes, there were guys linked to the Bears for weeks for that, including Cam Newton. Andy Dalton was a big name. Another question being asked was are we going to send some picks to the Raiders for Derek Carr? Bridgewater was a name that came up. He was actually in contract negotiations for the Bears right when that free agency portal, I guess, opened. But honestly, I was a little bit surprised when the Foles thing did go down. Cam Newton, before I get into my reaction about the Foles thing, Cam Newton, his medical history is a little bit shady. That's the only thing about him. I don't doubt that he's proven but I think his medical history is a little bit shady, and he's a little bit inconsistent for me. I think Foles can do the good things consistently, which is something that Mitchell Trubisky lacks. But as far as Foles goes, if you look at the coaching staff in Chicago, it makes perfect sense. When Foles was in Philadelphia in 2014, he was with the Bears offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor. The last couple of years in Philadelphia and Jacksonville, he was with the head quarterback coach, Don DeFilippo. And obviously in 2015 and 16, he spent time there with Matt Nagy. So some very nice familiarity there with Nick Foles and this offensive coaching staff. And in an offseason where things can get really weird, I was sent home from college and all this crazy stuff's going on. In an offseason where things could get weird, he could really be your week one starter if there's no OTAs or training camp, because he already has a very developed knowledge of this offense, and we just need to brush up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Whereas Trubisky's got a new offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach coming in. Matt Nagy's obviously still the one calling shots, but I think there's more there for Mitch to learn than there is for the veteran and Super Bowl 52 MVP and Foles. So when you look at that at the end of the day, the Bears also got his contract down. They're paying him only $5 million years annually. The contract is a little bit weird. He has, I think it's 8 incentives, and those incentives are based on winning and doing well. So like passing yards, touchdowns, All-Pro, Pro Bowl, playoff, Super Bowl. And he earns $5 million in 2020. If he gets any of those accolades or those those incentives, those get added to his contract for the year after. So say he gets 3 of those accolades, then he earns $8 million in 2021. So it's an interesting format of a contract. Obviously he went to Jacksonville and signed that massive deal. But when you look at it from a whole, I think the Bears are kind of lining up to make a run like the Chiefs did last year. And I'm not saying they're going to make a run at the Super Bowl this year. I think they're lining up to make a similar – to follow in the Chiefs' steps with Andy Reid there with Matt Nagy. If you look at the Chiefs, obviously they had Alex Smith there for a couple of years, ended up drafting Mahomes. Alex Smith mentored him for a year or two. They shipped off Smith, and now they are here with Mahomes, who seems like he's a seasoned veteran at this point. And I think if Trubisky doesn't pan out, the Bears are going to take that same steps. I said it earlier, draft a quarterback in 2021, but you hopefully will have a healthy Foles there to mentor him for 2021, 2022. And then hopefully whoever that quarterback may be will be ready. And I'm hoping it'll pan out similar to the way that it did for Andy Reid and Mahomes down there in Kansas City. If you look at Mitch in general, just to go back on him for a second, obviously when Nagy was down in Kansas City, his pick was Mahomes, and he's spoken highly of Trubisky, but I feel like Nagy personally hasn't gotten to work with the quarterback that he ideally sees in Chicago in his offense yet. So that's an interesting point. And I'm forgetting your third question there. Sorry about that.
I'm kind of forgetting it too, but I kind of wanted to talk about the Khalil Mack trade.
Oh, yeah.
Just what are your thoughts on it? Looking back on it now, obviously it was a big splash, and it came into fruition, right? 12-4 right after he gets there. So what are your thoughts on that?
So that's an interesting one. That's definitely an interesting one. I mean, you look at Mack and you look at what we gave up. There was obviously some late round picks, but the most important things were those 2 first round picks. And you look what the Las Vegas Raiders got. It still feels so weird saying that. But look at what they got. They got Josh Jones last year, which was a very good pick. Don't get me wrong. This year they select Damon Arnetti out of Ohio State, a cornerback, who I do a big board over at Bear Down. I'm not saying I'm any draft expert by any means, but everyone thought he was picked way too high. Had second and third round.
And I'm a Buckeyes fan too, and I thought he was picked high.
Yeah, but not saying Arnetti isn't going to pan out either. Bears got Khalil Mack, and then the second round pick that they used this year, which was 50th overall, and they got Jalen Johnson with that pick, a cornerback who I think, if he's healthy, is better than Damon Arnetti. So I think unquestionably, especially now with the addition of Robert Quinn, Mack's going to be seeing more single teams and double teams. You saw a lot of triple teams last year if you actually break down the film, and obviously Akeem Hicks being healthy there. At the nose tackle position.
That's a big point that you mentioned.
At the end of the day, Mack's still going to be productive. He might not put up great numbers, but someone's going to be free. You can't block Hicks, Robert Quinn, and Mack. He changes the game for everyone around him. So if you had to ask me whether or not the Bears won that trade, I probably would say they would. Josh Jacobs is probably panning out to be a star running back there in Las Vegas, and we'll see what happens with Arnetti. But if Jalen Johnson can stay healthy, I think he solidifies his spot in the secondary. Bears have Chuck Pagano there, defensive coordinator, someone who's known for being really a secondaries guy. He was in Baltimore back then with Ed Reed and those guys. And also I think it's just a great situation for Jalen Johnson to be entering alongside all pros like Kyle Fuller, Eddie Jackson, veterans like Deshaun Gibson, and even guys like Buster Screen, our nickel corner. He's not the great. You know him. You're a Browns guy.
Yeah,
So,
I remember him.
yeah,
He had his moments, but lacked consistency. But I think right system, he can get some help.
Yeah, but Screen is I wouldn't say he's the greatest cornerback, but he definitely knows the ropes of the NFL and can pass some stuff on to Jalen Johnson. So I think he's in the perfect spot to succeed. And I would give the Bears the edge in that trade overall.
Yeah, we've talked about the tight ends, and the Bears have a lot, but I want to kind of go into maybe the receivers, because while they may have tight ends, I'm not sure under Allen Robinson how the receivers are going to pan out for the Bears. So if you wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I actually recorded an episode on my podcast a couple days ago about how the wide receiver depth chart was going to fall. Guys that they have are Robinson, Anthony Miller, who's someone who's still blossoming into what I think will eventually one day be a star. Obviously, they just signed Ted Ginn. They just signed Trevor Davis as well, an interesting prospect who spent some time in Green Bay, Oakland, and Miami. They've got two young guys from the Georgia Bulldogs, Javon Wims, who's entering his third year in the league, and Riley Ridley.
I'm a fan of Javon Wims. I like him.
Yeah. And then Riley Ridley, who's younger brother of Calvin Ridley. Yeah. So another interesting one there. And then obviously you got Cordero Patterson, but I wouldn't really group him as a wide receiver because he can do so much all over the field. You can use him at different positions. I wouldn't really categorize him as that. I would probably more so categorize Patterson as a special teamer. And don't get me wrong, he's got great value. He was an All-Pro and Pro Bowler last year. But you want to know like who I think is going to make the cut, because there's obviously a lot of receivers.
Yeah, and is that going to be enough, to be completely honest, for whoever?
Yeah,
Foles or Trubisky.
I think they have like 9 right now, and I might have missed some there. But you think if Ginn can stay healthy, obviously he's 35 years old. That being said, he ran a 4.28 40-yard dash, and if you watched him in Carolina and you watched him in New Orleans, even in the last couple of years, he only played 9 games there for the Saints last year. He was dealing with some injuries, and he ended up being really, really good. Still 400-plus receiving yards, 20-plus catches. I think it was 2 touchdowns. Obviously, his best year came when he had 10 touchdowns there in 2015, Cam Newton's MVP year down there in Carolina. But Ted Ginn's someone who I think can take the top off of defense. One guy I completely forgot to mention, I just realized, is Darnell Mooney, the 5th-round pick out of Tulane. A really interesting prospect, someone who probably would have fallen to the Green Bay Packers, so I'm glad the Bears traded up for him. But, Darnell Mooney ran, I think, a 4.38, and a really solid receiver there who can learn under Ted Ginn, and I think he'll be really good in the future. If you look at Ryan Pace in the draft, he's hit on late-round picks multiple times. Nick Kwiatkowski, who's now with the Raiders, Adrian Amos, who's now with the Packers, Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen, Eddie Jackson, Cody Whitehair. There's so many late-round picks that Pace has hit on, so I trust his ability to draft there in the late rounds. But I do think the Bears have enough receivers. I know you mentioned something about Javon Wims. Unfortunately, I don't know if he makes the cut because I think Riley Ridley deserves some more chances. They drafted him with a 4th-round pick. They only put a 7th-round pick into Javon Wims, so yeah, he's proven that he can do it. I think it's going to be tough for him. I think he's definitely proven that he can do it. It might not be in Chicago, but I think we'll roll with about 6 wide receivers. If I had to guess, probably Robinson, Anthony Miller at the 2, but he'll play in the slot. He likes playing in the slot, but he'll get wide receiver 2 reps. And if he can stay healthy, he was really starting to turn it on there at the end of 2019. Ted Ginn, someone there who you can throw a wide receiver 3 on the outside across from Robinson, who can really take the top off of defense as long as he can stay healthy. And then you'd probably look at Ridley and Darnell Mooney, and I guess I'd group Patterson in there as well, even though I said I wasn't going to do it earlier.
Yep. And you think that's enough?
Whoops.
Do you think that's enough for your offense?
Yeah, I mean 6. I think maybe if we do keep 7, it will end up being Wims or Trevor Davis. I think it's going to be
I kind of meant more like the talent. Is that enough talent?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Bears' offensive line, just in general wasn't great last year, which led to some more sacks. Trubisky took 38 sacks. I think Chase took a couple when they played in London there. Obviously, it's important that you have someone that can get the ball to the wide receivers. And if Mitch shows in training camp that he can't do that, I assure you guys that Nick Foles will be ready and hopefully we'll be able to do that. Everyone says stuff about Foles not, performing well outside of Philadelphia. But if you look at his other stints, with the St. Louis Rams when he was there in I think it was 2015 to 16, they had nothing. That Jeff Fisher was their coach, if that tells you anything. He was, I feel like the Chiefs were rebuilding with him there in 2015 to 2016. And obviously we know how bad Jacksonville was last year, and we can see what they're trying to do now to kick up a rebuild. So I think if you compare the weapons that he's going to have here to the players he had in Philadelphia when he won that title, Trey Burton replaced by, I guess, Jimmy Graham, which isn't the greatest replacement, but you also got Kmet there. Alshon Jeffrey can be replaced with Allen Robinson. Nelson Aguilar is okay, but I overall think if Foles is the guy, if he can hit the receivers in the hands, that it will be enough talent to be able to win us some games.
So, yeah, just a couple more questions kind of looking back. So one of them was you guys chose to keep Trevathan over Kwiatkowski.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a weird thing for me because Kwiatkowski is younger, I believe, and he also I saw a lot of potential in him.
A little bit smaller of a contract as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I saw a lot of potential in him, and I thought it was a good pickup for the Raiders. So kind of what are your reactions to that? And then you brought up the offensive line. That's a good thing. So I believe Kyle Long retired recently, which was, I think, a huge loss. So, and I don't know if Josh Sitton is still there.
No, he's not. He's been retired.
Yeah, he's been retired. Exactly. So there's kind of like a lot revamping of the offensive line now.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned the 38 sacks. So, there's some talent that they've had, trying to get some new talent overall. Obviously, they use some picks on offensive linemen. So kind of two kind of questions for you. Obviously, one, the Kwiatkowski decision, and kind of the offensive line. Where do you see the offensive line playing out? Because that's a very important facet of the game, at least in my opinion.
That's a really good question, Anish. You look at the offensive line. I'll answer that one first. It's a tough one because they brought in Germain Ifedi. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he was terrible for the Seahawks there the last couple of years. That being said, he's a former 31st overall pick in the 2016 NFL draft. He played guard, actually, in his first year in Seattle and was decent. Not mind-numbing numbers, but he was solid. I mean, and the Bears are actually going to move him back to guard now, so he'll get an opportunity to actually play again. You look at his film, he's not someone who can move incredibly well laterally, so you would assume he wouldn't be that great out there to tackle when you're trying to run the ball left and right with the shifty David Montgomery, who had he did have 1,000 all-purpose yards last year behind what was the 29th, I believe, ranked offensive line in the league. So just in general, the offensive line does need to improve as far as David Montgomery goes and whoever's going to be at quarterback. If you look at the rest of the line, they have two really solid pieces there at guard and center with James Daniels and Cody Whitehair. As far as the tackles go, you got Bobby Massey and Charles Leno Jr. Leno Jr. is someone who was a 2018 Pro Bowler, someone who was a former 7th-round pick who really developed in Chicago, had a terrible, and I mean terrible year last year. 13 sacks allowed, 13 penalties, 6 sacks allowed. That would have been bad. But one of the worst offensive linemen in the league after a Pro Bowl year there in 2018. So I think he'll bounce back. I don't think he can get much worse than it was for him there in 2019. So they also picked 2 offensive linemen in the 7th round. I said it earlier. I trust Pace drafting that deep and still getting some good talent. Only 12% of the NFL's players are made up by first rounders. You don't really realize how many players in this league are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounders and undrafted free agents. So you never know. I mean, they got 2 offensive linemen there. They also signed Germain Ifedi. They also signed Jason Spriggs, someone who played for the Packers, a former 2nd-round pick who the Bears traded up above the Packers in I think it was the 2017 draft. No, 2016 draft. To pick Cody Whitehair over Jason Spriggs. Spriggs is someone who's played in 37 career games in Green Bay throughout his 3 or 4 seasons. I don't even know. I can't even tell you when he was drafted. But 9 starts. He's dealt with some injuries. He's someone there who can fill in at tackle if he can stay healthy. For the Bears in general, it just comes down to health, and that's the same thing with any NFL team if you want to be successful. I think the depth is there on defense. I think as far as the offensive line goes, I think Ifedi will serve us well at guard, if I'm being completely honest. I think he'll be much better than he was at Seattle, and I think he'll actually start, as surprising as it sounds, but he's here on veteran minimum money, so it's not that big of a risk. You got the 2 solid pieces there in the middle, and then you would hope that Leno and Bobby Massey there at the tackles can have a better year. So I'm hoping overall that the guards can do better for sure this year. And then as far as Kwiatkowski and Trevathan goes, that was a shocker for me personally. But when you really look into it, Trevathan's gone down with some nasty injuries the last couple of years. Last year he had a really weird elbow injury. It was disgusting to watch on film. But he's really the leader of this defense when it boils down to it. Something that I don't think Nick Kwiatkowski could really step up to, being as young as he is. And that's nothing against him. I think he's a really talented player. But if you look at Trevathan, he's been here for a couple of years, and ever since all these guys have flown in, like Mac, like Akeem Hicks, Kyle Fuller was one of the ones that was still here, but like Eddie Jackson, guys now like Deshaun Gibson, Roquan Smith. He's really been the middle linebacker. He's been the play caller. He's the one out there doing all the big duties. I think his leadership role really can't be overlooked. Obviously it was a little bit more money than Kwiatkowski got there, but he's also a really talented player when he's healthy. So, yeah, I think you couldn't make a wrong decision there unless Trevathan gets hurt. But we'll see if he can maintain his health here in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Anish, if you don't have any more questions, we can start kind of getting into the awards like we've done the last couple episodes. You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. So let's look towards the future.
Yeah. So the last couple episodes that we've done, we go over each team's offensive and defensive player of the year, as well as rookies of the year, and then maybe a comeback player of the year. So if you want to get us started, Chris, on the offensive and defensive player of the year predictions that you have.
Okay. Man, this is a tough one. Offensive player of the year. I'm going to go with David Montgomery. I also think he'll probably be the most improved.
Yeah.
But I expect a very good year out of him in 2020. That's a bold one. You could have obviously – I think that's a little bit of an under-the-radar pick as well. You could have obviously gone with Allen Robinson. You could have gone with a guy like a Foles if he comes in and plays well, but we're really uncertain of what's going to happen there at the quarterback position. So I would say probably David Montgomery or Allen Robinson. You would expect improved tight end play, but I think in general the offensive line – it's going to be stagnant enough to allow him to really do his thing this year. Coming out of Iowa State in 2019, he's a former third-round pick, known for being really elusive, breaking tackles. He didn't have much help last year, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. And he was able to do a lot, almost 900 rushing yards, also really good in the passing game. And I think he only goes up on those numbers as the years continue. I really think he's a special back, even though we picked him in the third round. Defensive player of the year, I'm going to go with Eddie Jackson. He played at strong safety there with HaHa Clinton-Dix playing free safety there in 2019. Obviously, you guys all know Eddie Jackson for making turnovers in his first couple of years in the league and scoring touchdowns. And that's when he was playing free safety. Mm-hmm. Not only does he have a really nice complementary piece there with Deshaun Gibson, someone who has been a Pro Bowler before.
Played for us. I really like him with us.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. But someone who's played for the Browns and really been able to be productive. It moves Eddie back to his natural position, and he's a ball hawk, and I think he's going to really thrive back there.
Yeah, those are some great – I can't even argue with your picks. I think for David Montgomery, it was like when he came out, it's actually really funny. I made a bet with my friend. He actually thought I made a bet that he wasn't getting 1,000 rushing yards. And unfortunately, I did win the bet. But I mean, now that you look at it, right, Jordan Howard's long gone now. And I actually – for me, at least, I really liked when Jordan Howard was kind of the sole back there. I was a huge fan of his game. He got 1,300 yards his first year and then 1,100 his second year. So I think, but then when I feel like, with Tariq Cohen there, I mean, obviously he's a flashy guy. He's a big playmaker. I think keep him in the punt returning game. Obviously you have Patterson there as well. I just think David Montgomery's got to be that, consistent running back. They've got to give him more touches, and that will allow him to have his game flourish because he did have those big games. Obviously, he lacked consistency, but he's just starting out. He's got time. Yeah. He can easily become a top 10 running back given the right coaching. But my offensive player of the year, I mean, like I've said, I'm a huge fan of Allen Robinson. It's hard to go wrong there. This dude is just a consistent producer, especially last year in that playoff game. When I watched that playoff, I believe he had 130 yards or 129, something like that.
Yeah, real good game for him.
Exactly. And when I saw that game, I was like, okay. Obviously, they lost, but I said, okay, that's a good sign going into next year because for NFL players, it's not about how you start, it's how you finish. Like, for example, like Derrick Henry, obviously he had a terrible kind of first 12 games 2 years ago, but the final 4, he had like 500-plus yards. And then obviously we saw what he did this year, right? So with NFL players, exactly. So it's just how you finish and how you can carry over into the next year. And with Allen Robinson, right, he did that 2 years ago. He's obviously had a consistent year this year. And I only see his production even going up, whether it be Foles or Trubisky, because it's really hard for those quarterbacks to kind of step it down, right? Because I don't see Trubisky getting any worse than he did because 17 touchdowns, that's just not – that. Honestly, that's like a fluke. Those are fluke numbers. Like, I mean, while he may not have the same production, same thing with Foles, it's going to be better than that. I think Bears fans can look up to that. And then for defensive player of the year, it was really tough, but I think I got to go with Khalil Mack here. Obviously, that's sort of an obvious pick, but just what the dude has been able to do. And you mentioned it. You brought up a great point where Robert Quinn, Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack. I mean, it's so hard to block all three of those guys, right? Correct me if I'm not sure if they run a 3-4 or a 4-3 on defense, but
I think it's a 3-4.
Yeah, so then that gives them so much versatility there with those three defensive linemen. So I think Khalil Mack's just gonna eat up opposing quarterbacks, especially in the NFC North. You got Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins there, so there's a lot of competition there. So I got Khalil Mack as my defensive player of the year. Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, so offensive player of the year. I mean, it's simple to go with the quarterback, but in this case, not knowing who it's going to be, you can't pick either of them. Just in the off case you're wrong,
Yeah.
And they don't even start. But I think I go with you, Anish. I go Allen Robinson. I thought about David Montgomery, and he's going to be my pick for kind of comeback player of the year, breakout player of the year. But I think that
exactly.
Allen Robinson is the star receiver there, and whoever is going to play quarterback, he'll be a great safety net to find all over the field. And I think you'll see his production go up from these last couple of years. So he's going to be my offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year, I went a little bit kind of different than you guys. I'm going to take Roquan Smith, actually, at middle linebacker. We could see an all-pro
first-round pick
Bowl season from Roquan Smith, put himself in that top-tier middle linebackers. And I think it'll be good for him to prove himself this year now that Kwiatkowski's gone. And he can finally be, I think, a main fixture of that defense because I think he's maybe a little bit overlooked with all the linebackers that they had. So I think Roquan Smith is going to prove himself this year, and he'll be the defensive player of the year. Do you want to start us off on the offensive and defensive rookies of the year, Chris?
All right. I think you got to go with the second-round picks. I don't think there's any more obvious picks as far as those guys are going to get just simply based off those guys getting the most reps. I mean, Jalen Johnson, if he's healthy, he's going to be the cornerback too, across from Kyle Fuller. I mean, that's a deadly duo as is.
Exactly. Yep.
He's only going to get better. And on offense, Kmet's going to get his chances. Otherwise, I'd probably say Darnell Mooney, the fifth-round pick, but Kmet's going to get his chances, and I think he's really going to blossom into the best tight end that we've seen with the Bears since someone like a Greg Olsen. So, I think that those picks are pretty obvious for me.
Yeah, same here. I think you got to go with the second-round picks. I think it's just how can Graham mentor Kmet to be both receiver and blocker, because with New Orleans, he was just a physical monster, right? Obviously, you did have Drew Brees down there, but still, Jimmy Graham in his peak was, it was real close between him and Gronk, right? So he can easily mentor Kmet, obviously a Notre Dame guy, and you mentioned the success they've had with tight ends in the past. So I think he can easily blossom into a security blanket for whoever starts under center. And you brought up Greg Olsen for Chicago. I thought that was a great mention right there. Obviously, Jalen Johnson coming in from the Pac-12. He's played against some receivers, obviously, like Michael Pittman. He's had some kind of competition there. So I think coming in next to Kyle Fuller, who I absolutely love. I think he's one of my favorite corners in the game. So I think he's got a lot of potential next to him. So I think those are pretty obvious picks for me, and I'd love to see what they can do for the Bears.
Yeah, it's hard to go anywhere else for this team because they didn't have a ton of draft picks, especially in the early rounds, but they hit on there too, I think, with Kmet and Jalen Johnson. I've seen Jalen Johnson play a lot, watching him at Utah for a couple of years now. He is a good corner. I think he should have gone in the first round, to be completely honest. So being able to grab him towards the end of the second is a steal. So the Bears got it right there. Those two are the obvious picks for rookies of the year. And then we've already mentioned really our comeback player of the year. I'm going to go with David Montgomery just because he's going to show out, I think, in his second year when he gets a little bit more attempts, just running the ball in general. I think they're starting to move a little bit away from Tariq Cohen just because it's shown that he's not as good of a runner as David Montgomery, and I hope he gets chances this year so he can prove himself.
Yeah. As far as Cohen goes, I don't think he's a Bear past 2020. I think his team tries to use leverage of his 2018 season where he was really good as a receiving back to try and earn him a big contract. I think if he doesn't return to a very good form in 2018, he's not going to be the guy. So, there's my tidbit on him. And obviously, I don't think he's going to get the chance to be close to as productive with the weapons we have as far as receivers go. And obviously, David Montgomery calling for more carries this year. For most improved, I'm going to go Anthony Miller. I think that's a pretty easy pick for me as well. Someone who's a really pristine route runner. I think one of the best in the league. Has had some shoulder injuries. throughout the last 2 years, but really started to show that he can be that guy last year at the end. Had a great game against the Packers and the Cowboys. He's really someone who's going to step up and I think can really hit his stride this year.
Yeah, those are great picks. So David Montgomery, I did mention that I can see him easily becoming a 1,000-yard rusher next year. I'm going to go with Roquan Smith. Jack, kind of you alluded to what you were talking about there. I think he has the potential to be a Pro Bowler. I think Trevathan can easily mentor him. You've seen Trevathan have his highlights with Chicago and Denver, so I think he can easily pass that on to Roquan Smith, a former first-round pick. I believe he was top 10, so he's got the college resume to back it up. And I can easily see him blossoming into a Pro Bowl linebacker with that nasty front seven. I mean, this Bears defense is just got playmakers all around it, and going back to that kind of ground and pound defensive team that they've had, throughout their 100-year history, right? So, if they can get back to what they've been, known for, obviously they haven't found the quarterback yet. But Rex Grossman is like, I don't even know if that's the best quarterback in their history. Like, I don't even know. But, I got to go with Roquan Smith here.
So now let's move on to record predictions. Chris, you want to start us off? Maybe give us a floor and a ceiling, and then your kind of final pick realistically for the Bears this year?
Yeah, I'd say I'm being a little bit bold with this, but I'd say my floor is 9 wins. My ceiling is 11, and I think I'm going to go right in the middle with 10-6. I think that's a pretty fair projection. If you look at the Bears last year, I mean, they go 8-8. Akeem Hicks out most of the season. I talked about the inproductivity, I guess. I don't even know if that's a word, of Leonard Floyd not being able to be productive there at all. So Mac was basically in hell when you look at it from that point. Eddie Pinheiro misses a kick against the Chargers to win that game. I think there are a couple of plays. I've talked to a couple of players on the team, Prince Amukamara, the most recent one, and all of them that I've talked to have agreed to me that it's a couple plays from 10-6 and in the playoffs. And that just shows how football is a game of inches. So I'm going to go with 10-6. I think if the Bears offense can be – I mean, it was bad last year. The offensive line was bad. The quarterback play was bad. If you look at Trubisky, he took 38 sacks. I mentioned it earlier. 15 of those were statistically on him. I've got some buddies over that work at a group called the Windy City Gridiron, and they do something called Sack Watch. And basically denotes who the sack is on. 15 of the sacks were on Trubisky for not getting rid of the ball, not making a read, whatever. And I don't think Foles is going to be like that. Obviously, we know Trubisky's a better athlete than Foles and can do more with the ball. But when it comes to Foles, he's going to make the throws, and if not, he's going to get rid of the ball. So I think less sacks this year, maybe a little bit more reliable kicking. Obviously, we know what happened with Parkey. Eddie Pinheiro is someone I like. He works really hard. He has the leg. He needs the accuracy. He proved last year he had the leg. That game, the second game of the season, 53-yard game winner in the altitude.
I believe it was Denver, right?
Yeah, great game winner, and that was really sick for Bears fans. We needed that one for a while. I was going crazy there in my college dorm, but I think 10-6 is a good projection. You look at the 2020 defense, you can compare it to the 2018 defense, whereas there's really good starters, and behind the starters there's some pretty gosh darn good depth. So I'm going to go floor 9, ceiling 11, and my prediction is going to be 10-6.
So yeah, that's I think it's a pretty bold one there. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule. Obviously, it just came out. And this guy was able to get it early. So if you guys want earlier news, please go check out his page. Is down below in the description. Please go check him out. And so, yeah, that's a really big kind of I think with the Bears, it's like they were able to go 8-8. And they had some quality wins, right? You kind of mentioned the one in Denver. I thought the Cowboys win was also really spectacular. I thought that was a really good win for them. And they always play – obviously, they played well against the Vikings. They beat them twice.
They beat them 4 games in a row. They haven't beaten.
Yep, yeah. So 4 in a row. Obviously, the 2-2 Vikings that lost to the Bears, right? That kind of sparked Kirk Cousins to kind of become, a better kind of player. So you can see that the Bears have, like quality wins in the division, and they know their opponents well. Obviously, with the Packers, it's been up and down, but with the Lions and the Vikings, I mean, the Bears are always up to par with them. So I can easily see them going, 4-2 in the division, maybe even 5-1, depending on what they do.
They can take one from Green Bay.
Yeah, exactly. It all depends on how they can go. So I think my absolute floor for them would be 7-9 because I think because I think if stuff happens, right, obviously they've got a tough stretch, right, down there. They've got Green Bay, Detroit, Houston. Now, while that does seem kind of easy, right, Green Bay and Detroit back to back. Obviously, you played Minnesota the week before, so I think that's 3 division rivals in a row. That could be drastic. It all depends on obviously the whole quarterback situation as well. I think my ceiling would be 10-6, just because I think I can easily see them improving from an 8-8 record that they had last year. Obviously, I believe their schedule is a tad bit harder this year, but I think the NFC North. I think the Vikings got a bit better. The Packers kind of stayed where they are because they did do well in free agency, but their draft, obviously, we know what happened there. Jordan Love, but
Yeah.
I think Detroit is just a mess. I mean, I don't know where Matt Patricia's going. I mean, I don't know where they're headed. So, while Minnesota and Green Bay are still there, the Bears can definitely become the second best team in the division. Maybe even the best. It really just depends with that. The NFC North, I think it's one of the 4 best divisions in football. So I think it's all up in the air there. So I think for realistic predictions, I'm going to go. It's really tough between 8-8 and 9-7. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll go 9-7.
Yeah, I think I mean I voiced it all last year. I was really not a big fan of the Packers. They had the record, but I didn't think that they had what they needed on the field, and it kind of showed in the playoffs, getting embarrassed by the Niners. So I think the Bears have a solid shot to take the division this year. I think Minnesota, unlike you and East, I think they got worse, to be completely honest, especially on the defensive side of the ball, losing a lot of talent. They did have a good draft, but you can't always bank on that.
That is true. That is true.
And they lost a ton of personnel on the defense side of the ball. And the Bears got better throughout free agency and the draft. So I think I'm going to go 9-7, but I could see, like you said, in each 8-8 or 10-6. But I think a division title is completely in reach for the Bears. Chris, you want to kind of end on anything?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the rest of the NFC North just for a second, obviously Green Bay is always going to be up there. That was a really weird draft that they had there. But if you look at the Vikings, I mean, the Bears have had their number for the past 2 years. They lose Stephon Diggs. You mentioned some key pieces on defense. Everson Griffin's gone. They brought in DJ Wanham, but I don't think he's going to be a great replacement for him. And he's also a tackle. Everson Griffin was an edge. They lose their top 2 corners in Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think both of them went to Cincinnati actually.
Yep.
But that's going to be tough to add as well. Don't get me wrong. I think they're probably the best draft in the NFC North, if not the Bears, and the Lions also had a good draft there with Okudah. But yeah, I mean, they add Jeff Gladney. They add Ezra Cleveland, who will be a day 1 starter on their whole line.
Yep.
And they also had Justin Jefferson, but you had a good point. You can't bank on rookies to do it day 1. I think the Bears defense is shaping up to be better, if not as good in 2018. I think they're going to have a top 3 defense in the league.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Obviously, go down in the description if you're watching this and check out all of Chris's stuff. His Instagram and podcast will be down there. It was awesome to have you on. That was a great episode. And we're going to have more content just like this with other pages in the future. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.